I used to think betrayal was loud. I thought it would sound like screaming, slamming doors, broken glass, maybe fists hitting walls. But real betrayal is quiet. It starts with silence. And by the time you finally hear it coming, your entire life is already burning down around you. Daniel and I had been best friends since we were 13. Same school, same neighborhood, same stupid teenage mistakes. We were the kind of friends people envied because no matter what happened, we always had each other's backs. When my father died during my second year of college, Daniel slept on my couch for nearly 2 weeks. Not because I asked. Not because I even said I was struggling. He just showed up one Tuesday night with 2 sleeping bags and a bag of takeout and said, "I'm not leaving you alone in this." I didn't know how to explain what that meant to me. I still don't. When his family almost lost their home years later, I emptied my savings account without blinking. He tried to refuse it. "I can't take this from you," he said. "You're not taking it," I told him. "I'm giving it." He stared at me for a long moment, jaw tight, eyes wet. Then he pulled me into a hug so hard it nearly cracked my ribs. That was us, brothers without blood. So when we both got married within the same year, it felt like life had finally rewarded us for all the garbage we survived growing up. My wife, Emma, was everything good in this world. Gentle, funny, the kind of person who apologized to furniture after bumping into it. She once cried at a nature documentary about salmon swimming upstream. When I teased her about it, she threw a pillow at me and said, "They work so hard, okay? Leave them alone." I loved her completely, every strange, warm, ridiculous piece of her. Daniel married Sophia. She was beautiful, confident, smart in a way that made you feel like she was always 3 steps ahead of the room. Maybe too smart. At first, everything felt perfect. Weekend barbecues, double dates. Late-night card games where Daniel cheated so obviously we'd all end up laughing too hard to keep score. The 4 of us became inseparable. Until little things started changing. Tiny things. The kind you ignore because your brain refuses to connect dots you never wanted to see in the first place. Sophia started texting me late at night. At first it seemed harmless. "Daniel fell asleep during movie night again, lol. You're honestly the only mature one between you two." Then the messages shifted. "You know, Emma is lucky you're so loyal. You'd make an incredible father someday. I wish Daniel listened the way you do." I remember staring at one particular message at 2 a.m., my stomach tightening for reasons I couldn't name. I set the phone down, picked it up again, read it twice. Something felt wrong, not enough to accuse her of anything, but enough to make me quietly pull back. I stopped replying quickly, stopped being alone with her, stopped lingering after gatherings. When Emma asked why I always seemed in a hurry to leave Daniel's place lately, I told her I was tired from work. That wasn't entirely a lie. I thought pulling back would solve it. I was wrong. One rainy Thursday night changed everything. Daniel was out of town for work. Emma was visiting her mother 2 hours away. I was home alone when someone knocked on my apartment door. Sophia, completely soaked from the rain. Hair plastered to her face, standing in my doorway like the storm had washed her there. My first instinct was panic. Something had happened to Daniel. "Come in," I said immediately, stepping aside. "What's wrong?" "Is Daniel?" "Daniel is fine," she said quietly. I grabbed a towel from the bathroom and handed it to her. She just stood there holding it, making no move to dry herself. That's when I noticed the way she was looking at me, not scared. Not upset, hungry. Something cold moved through my chest. "Sophia, you never answered my last message," she said. "I've been busy," she almost smiled. "You've been avoiding me." I didn't respond. She stepped closer. "I've tried to stop thinking about you, I really have." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "But I can't anymore. You need to stop right there. Nobody would have to know, not Daniel, not Emma. We could." I cut her off. Stepped back so sharply I nearly knocked into the counter. "What is wrong with you?" My voice came out harder than I intended. "Daniel is my brother. Emma is my wife. Do you understand what you're suggesting?" Her expression changed in an instant. The softness vanished. Something else moved behind her eyes, something I couldn't name but felt like a warning. "You're really choosing this?" she said. "There's nothing to choose. Please leave." For a few long seconds, neither of us moved. Then she smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who had just made a decision. She left without another word. And I stood in my kitchen for a long time after the door closed, listening to the rain, feeling the cold dread of a mistake I hadn't made but somehow knew I'd still be blamed for. The unraveling began slowly. Daniel became distant, subtle at first, missed calls, rescheduled plans. Then he started canceling without explanation. When we were together, he barely held eye contact. I told myself he was just stressed from work. Then one night he called me at midnight. "I need you to come over." His voice was flat. "Now." When I arrived, he was standing in his living room with his phone in his hand. Sophia was nowhere to be seen. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. "Tell me it isn't true," he said. "Tell you what isn't true." He shoved the phone toward me. Screenshots, texts. An entire conversation supposedly between me and Sophia, flirting, suggestive comments, plans to meet while he was out of town. My blood went ice cold. "Daniel, these are fake." He laughed, short, broken. "I've been staring at those all week, telling myself the same thing. They are fake. I would never." "She cried to me for 3 weeks," he snapped, voice cracking. 3 weeks, man. She told me she felt guilty. She told me she tried to shut it down. She showed me evidence. She made it. She made all of it. Why would she do that? I opened my mouth, and then I stopped. Because to tell the truth, I had to tell him everything, the late-night texts, the way she'd looked at me, the rainy night she'd come to my door. And saying all of that meant detonating whatever was left of his marriage and drowning him in a pain he wasn't ready to hold. Stupidly, even then, I still wanted to protect him. "I would never betray you," I said instead. "You know who I am?" He stared at me for a long time. "I thought I did." He asked me to leave. I drove home in silence and sat in my car outside my building for nearly an hour, staring at nothing, feeling something irreplaceable quietly crumble inside me. Over the next few months, Daniel became someone I barely recognized. The warmth disappeared from his voice. The easy laugh. The way he used to finish my sentences. All of it gone, replaced by a careful, guarded distance that felt like standing on the wrong side of a wall that used to be a door. I threw myself into work. Into Emma. She could feel something was wrong. Emma always could. One night she set down her book and said quietly, "You're carrying something, and you're carrying it alone." I looked at her. "I'm fine. You're not." She reached over and took my hand. "You don't have to tell me everything, but I need you to stop pretending you're okay." I squeezed her hand and said nothing. Because how do you tell someone that the person you considered a brother now looks at you like a stranger? How do you explain that kind of grief without also unraveling everything else? I kept my silence. And then life gave me something else to carry. Emma and I had been trying to have children for years. We never talked about how much it hurt. We just kept trying, kept hoping, kept letting ourselves believe that next month would be different. It wasn't. The fertility specialist's office smelled like antiseptic and artificial calm. Soft chairs, soft lighting, a small clock on the shelf that ticked so quietly it almost seemed apologetic. The doctor looked at the results for a long time before he looked at us. Emma's hand was in mine. "Your wife will not be able to conceive naturally," he said. The room tilted slightly. I heard the words clearly. I understood them. But something in my mind went very still, the way a city goes quiet right before a storm. Emma was silent beside me. I glanced at her, and she was staring at the doctor with an expression that was careful and held and absolutely breaking. I held her hand tighter. She had dreamed about being a mother since the day I met her. She used to stop mid-aisle in grocery stores to smile at strangers' babies. She kept a small pair of knitted yellow socks in her bedside drawer that she'd bought years ago before we even started trying. She never mentioned them, but I knew they were there. I made a terrible decision that day. I hid it from her. I told myself I needed time. Time to find another option. Time to figure out how to soften the blow before it landed. But secrets have a weight, and the longer you carry them, the more they reshape you. 2 weeks later, I came home to find Emma sitting on the kitchen floor. She was holding the medical report. Crying in the silent, desperate way that means someone has been crying for a long time before you arrived. I dropped beside her immediately. "Emma, why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. "I was going to, I had the right to know." I know, I'm sorry." She turned the paper over in her hands slowly. "I ruined your future." Her voice was barely a sound. "I'm so sorry." "Stop." I took the paper from her gently and set it aside, took both her hands. "Look at me." She wouldn't. "Emma." I touched her face. "Look at me." She finally did, eyes swollen, tears still falling. "You are my family," I said. "Not some imaginary future. You right here. You are what I chose. You are what I want. But you deserve children. I deserve you. That's enough. That will always be enough." She crumbled, put her face against my shoulder, and cried so hard her whole body shook. I held her on the kitchen floor for a long time. The lights outside went from orange to dark. Neither of us moved. That night something shifted between us, not away from each other, but deeper toward. That's when we found surrogacy. At first it seemed impossible, too expensive, too complicated. Too many ways it could fall apart. But for the first time in over a year, Emma laughed while talking about the future. A real laugh, surprised and full, the kind that catches you off guard. We cut expenses, worked extra hours, sold furniture, canceled subscriptions, skipped vacations. Slowly, month by month, we built toward something that once seemed completely out of reach. And that's when we found Dr. Marcus Hale. He came highly recommended, professional, calm. He had the kind of steady, measured manner that made you feel like everything was under control in his presence. But something about him always sat wrong with me. Whenever I walked in unexpectedly, conversations in his office stopped mid-sentence. His assistants never quite met my eyes. Once, during a consultation, I caught him studying my face with an expression that looked, just for a moment, like fear. I told myself I was being paranoid. But old habits are hard to kill. Then Sophia began appearing. Coffee shops near the clinic, the hospital parking lot, once late on a Tuesday evening standing across the street from our apartment building. When she saw me notice her, she smiled, slow and knowing, and walked away. I started noticing the black SUV, parked outside our building for hours, gone, back again 2 days later. Emma noticed my tension one evening while I stood at the window scanning the street below. "What are you looking for?" she asked softly. "Nothing." I stepped back from the window. "Probably nothing." She studied me for a long moment. "You're scaring me." I turned and forced a smile. "Don't be scared, we're fine." I didn't fully believe that, but I held it together, for her. Then, after years of heartbreak and holding on, our daughter arrived. I can't describe that moment in any way that does it justice. The first time I heard her cry, something deep inside me, something that had been slowly breaking for 2 straight years, quietly healed. Emma collapsed into tears the moment they placed her in her arms. She kept touching our daughter's tiny fingers over and over, like she needed to keep confirming she was real. "Hi," Emma whispered. "Hi. We've been waiting for you." I sat beside them both and couldn't speak for a long time. Daniel came. Our friendship was still fractured and tender, but when he saw the baby, his face changed completely. The guardedness dissolved. He looked young again, like the kid I used to know. "She's beautiful," he said quietly. "Yeah," I said, "she is." For a single, suspended moment, it felt like everything was finally, truly okay. Then the television in the hallway exploded with breaking news. Nurses paused. Doctors moved quickly between rooms. A charge nurse pressed her hand to her mouth. The screen showed Dr. Marcus Hale being walked out of a building in handcuffs, surrounded by federal agents. The headline underneath hit me like cold water. MULTI State Newborn Trafficking Network Exposed. Emma grabbed my arm hard. "What?" The reporter's voice came through the speaker. Authorities had uncovered an operation spanning multiple states involving stolen infants, manipulated surrogacy cases, forged medical records, and the illegal placement of children across private networks. Then Sophia's face appeared on the screen. The room went absolutely silent. Daniel went the color of chalk. Sophia had worked with Hale for years, not just as a recruiter, as his partner, in business, in everything. They had targeted vulnerable couples, desperate people. They had manipulated pregnancies, stolen newborns, blackmailed parents. The scale of it was staggering. Daniel sat down slowly, like his legs had stopped working. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." He turned and looked at me, and I watched it happen, the pieces falling into place behind his eyes. The fake screenshots, the manufactured evidence, the tears she'd cried to him for weeks. "You were telling the truth," he said. I didn't answer. Because at that moment, one question was consuming me entirely. Was our daughter safe? 2 federal investigators entered the hospital room. I was already standing when the lead agent, a woman with a sharp, careful way of moving, looked directly at me. "We've been waiting to speak with you," she said. "We finally understand why they targeted your family specifically." Emma looked at me. Daniel looked at me. "Your daughter is safe," the agent said immediately, reading my face. "All documentation has been verified. She is yours. She is safe." I exhaled slowly. "But we need you to hear why this happened." She explained quickly and quietly. They had recovered encrypted communications between Sophia and Hale going back over 2 years. Sophia hadn't come to me that rainy night by accident. Hale had identified me, not as a desperate husband, but as a federal officer whose quiet, methodical work on organized crime investigations had been edging dangerously close to the outer walls of their network. "You were never just a target for blackmail," the agent said. "You were a threat to be neutralized. If they could compromise you, discredit you, isolate you, destroy your support system, they could slow down the investigation." The room felt very still. "When Sophia approached you and you refused her, the plan changed. They couldn't control you, so they decided to dismantle you." I sat with that for a moment, All of it made sense now with horrible, perfect clarity. The surveillance, the fake messages, the deliberate destruction of my friendship with Daniel, the way they'd even tried to exploit our most private grief, our inability to have children, by placing us with Hale in the first place. They had turned the most vulnerable parts of my life into weapons. Daniel was trembling. "She used me," he said quietly, not a question. Just a man hearing something he already knew but hadn't yet been able to say out loud. "Yes," the agent said. He pressed both hands over his face and sat in absolute silence. A week later, I found Daniel sitting outside the hospital alone. He was staring at the ground like a man who had lost every internal argument he'd been having with himself. When he saw me, he stood up quickly and then seemed to lose the words he'd prepared. "I don't know where to start," he said. "Then don't start anywhere." "No," he shook his head. "I need to say this." He looked at me directly and his voice dropped to something raw and unguarded. "She cried in my arms about you. I held her while she cried, and I believed every single word. I know. I chose her over you. After everything," his voice broke, "after your father, after all of it, I chose her." I sat down on the bench beside him. "You were manipulated by someone who was very good at it," I said. "That's not the same as choosing." "It felt like choosing." "Yeah," I nodded slowly. "I know." We sat in silence for a while. The street sounds moved around us. Somewhere a bus hissed to a stop and moved on. "Can you ever forgive me?" he asked. I looked through the glass doors of the hospital, down the hall toward the room where Emma was holding our daughter against her chest, talking to her softly about nothing in particular. "I already have," I said. He looked at me. "I don't deserve that." "Maybe not, but hatred is exhausting, and I'm tired, Daniel. I've been tired for 2 years. I looked over at him. "I don't want to carry this anymore." He covered his eyes. And then he cried, not loudly, not dramatically. Just quietly, the way people cry when they've been holding something too heavy for too long and finally set it down. After a while, he pulled himself together, cleared his throat, looked at me sideways. "She's beautiful," he said. "Your daughter. She is. She looks like Emma." "Good, that's very good." He almost laughed. Before he left, he hugged me the same way he did after my father's funeral, both arms, no space, no pretense. Like a brother. I let him. That night, I stood beside Emma in the hospital room. She was asleep in the bed, one arm curled around our daughter. The city lights came through the window in soft, scattered shapes across the floor. I stood there watching them both for a long time. Everything I had almost lost moved through me quietly. Daniel, Emma, the years of doubt and grief and quiet terror. The night Sophia appeared at my door. The night I found Emma on the kitchen floor. The morning I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot, unable to move because fear had temporarily replaced everything else. All of it had happened. And here, on the other side of it, somehow, improbably, was this. Emma stirred, opened her eyes halfway and found me standing at the window. "Come here," she murmured. I sat on the edge of the bed beside her. She reached out and took my hand without looking, the way people reach for things they're sure will be there. "You okay?" she whispered. I looked at my daughter's small, sleeping face, her impossibly tiny fist pressed against her cheek. "Yeah," I said, and I meant it completely. Emma squeezed my hand once, then her eyes closed again. I sat there in the quiet for a long time. That's the strange thing about truth. People can bury it, distort it, weaponize lies against it. They can target your friendships, your grief, your love, your hope, and turn all of it into ammunition. But truth fights back, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, steadily, the way my daughter breathed in her sleep, persistent and alive and entirely unwilling to stop. Temptation destroys the weak, lies destroy the selfish. But loyalty, real loyalty, survives even when everything else burns to the ground. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, so does everything you almost lost.